Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the Productivity News Podcast. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith.
And I'm Augusto Pinaud.
And we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. This is episode 2, and we're recording this on May 15th, 2020. How is your quarantine Friday going, Augusto?
It is going well. It is going well. We have been staying in quarantine and trying the best to get into a new kind of routine with all this.
I hear you. I hear you. So each week we cover the productivity news headlines of the week. Then we have our Science of Productivity segment brought to you by Zarvana. Matt Plummer brings us the Science of Productivity. And then we go into our featured story of the week before we close out, where we provide a little bit more commentary and context for our featured story. With that, let's get into our headlines. First up, we have a new Learn OmniFocus website. What is the context on that, Augusto?
Tim Stringer has done an amazing job creating Learn OmniFocus, and he's been doing this now for 6 years, and he went into a big redesign of the website so you could find better the resources he has. In 6 years, he has accumulated an incredible amount of resources, and now with this redesign, you can even search much easier and a more powerful way all the things that he have done in there.
Next up, we have Notion. Notion is kind of the productivity software darling of the day. And this is a product that has recently gotten quite a bit of new funding during the lockdown. And so it is going full steam ahead with some new updates to its interface. So what they did was they actually were able to bring the mobile startup time to 2x faster than it was before, which is just phenomenal. I mean, they're really working to bring the speed of the mobile application up. They've got dark mode now working again, and so on Android, and the mobile loading screen now supports dark mode as well. So for those of you who are fans of dark mode, that's going to be that's going to be really great. They've got some markdown items that they fixed as well. So now code blocks are now quote unquote fenced in markdown exports so that they're not indented. They also fixed a couple of bugs and made a couple of improvements to it, but otherwise it looks like the system is coming right along in terms of speed and simpler design, and some updates to the iPad and Android tablet experience for multi-column support, and so on and so forth. So some good stuff coming out of Notion from that team. Next up, we have Amazon with some news around tablets.
Amazon has done a really good job with their low cost Android tablets, the Fire brand. And they just released a set of new 8-inch tablets that they start on the $89. Are they going to be a workhorse, powerful device? No, they are not designed to be that, but they are really a super affordable solution. And you can, it's a little bit of tinkering, even turn it into the equivalent to your kids to into these days of kids going home and learning at home and homeschooling and all this. Maybe that's a solution if you don't want to get a whole device or don't have access to another device. That or a Chromebook. Both will be starting on the $100 range, or you can find them on the $100 range and will be able to help you with that. But in the case of Amazon, they came with the new HD8 has a USB C port for charging, and a really interesting set of new features.
Yeah, one note here is that the Fire HD8 Kids Edition is the one that comes with the kind of, I'm not sure what type of material, but it's some kind of durable casing. And it comes also with a warranty that can be used in case your child goes ahead and destroys the tablet anyway, even with the bumper on it. The really interesting part about that, though, is that, of course, it has the Fire for Kids interface, but you can actually turn that off and go to the adult interface. So if you want to buy a tablet with a warranty, you could get that kids version with the bumper, that you're getting as a part of the bundle, but it has that warranty, which is actually really
Yeah, and I know people who has get this specific one, the kids edition, and on Amazon Fashion, they really is a no question ask. It works as they advertise.
exactly, exactly. So last week we talked about Slack updating the interface and the design for the Android experience as well as some desktop experience. And now Slack has recently put out a notice about rolling out their new design for iPhone as well as Android. So now we get the iPhone updates that they've been kind of talking about behind the scenes, but now they've officially announced that the latest versions of both apps are in the App Store, both in the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. And so people should be seeing now the update across their whole ecosystem, desktop and both mobile platforms. On the interface side, the mobile applications on iOS are pretty much getting the same features for parity with Android. You're going to see the swipe functionality, the home uh, button to check in on conversations, and then you'll see the other little tabs at the bottom for you to be able to go back and forth. So the biggest change is going to be the tab bar. So there at the bottom of your screen, you're going to be able to see the home button, your DMs for direct messages, private messaging, your mentions, and then you, which is going to take you to your basically your profile and account settings and so on and so forth for accessing your status and updating your do not disturb and so on and so forth. So that's really nice. Then you of course have the quick gestures, just like we talked about last week, of swiping left and right on the screen at the edges, which will navigate you between your left hand side navigation drawer as well as your workspaces. You'll see your threaded conversations, and then you'll be able to swipe right to get to the deeper threaded conversations. So I think it's a really good update to the design. Again, still getting used to the swiping functionality to get back and forth between places, but I think that it's overall going to be a positive.
So, I'm not a big Slack person, as I said, but the lowdown, it's coming to grab all that communication and all that engagement that is happening on Slack and then give you the ability to turn that into a newsletter for your community. So the cool thing with that is your community will be able to continue using Slack as they have, but then it will be able to grab all that and help you really speed up the process of turning all that interaction, all that communication, all that things into a newsletter for that community. So I think if you live on the Slack world, it is a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who manage paid membership communities, and this is one way to add an additional benefit to those who maybe you're not logging into the community every day or every week, and that gives them the newsletter to kind of summate the goings on, the happenings of that particular community. But this could also be really great for a company where you want to be able to kind of have a report, the state of the company, to be sent out once a week. And that keeps you on top of projects and actions that need to be taken or that have happened. So you can celebrate successes, understand how to correct course, and stay on top of what's happening in the upcoming week. So I like the idea of it, and so people who are in Slack have a new integration at their fingertips.
So the next item that we have in there is a Kickstarter, um, and it's an ultra portable mechanical keyboard. Keyboards is one of those things that can make or break a machine, in my opinion. There is people who really swear by the mechanical keyboards, but traditionally mechanical keyboards tend to be bulky. So the reason we bring this one is because it's designed to be super compacted, and they are trying to do so. They already did the pilot run, and they will do the pilot run at the end of the month, and they will begin mass production in June.
Yeah, so one side note about this is that WayTools has produced something called the Text Blade, which is a magnetic keyboard for your mobile devices. And I have ordered one and I'm expecting one very, very soon. And so this is akin to that, except this is a a wireless, a version of it, but it's the same thing. It's a portable keyboard that you can use to it. I'll put a link to this underneath this article in the show notes, so you can access it. But I think the ability to be able to type on a keyboard, even a smaller keyboard, is really really fundamental to being productive on the road. So really cool stuff there.
So Microsoft Surface Go 2 is out. Microsoft came with the Surface Go, and they are now refreshing the the device, coming with the version number 2. They are even aiming to one of them, the entry level, to be really a one-on-one competition with the iPad, price wise as well as features, and I will say even a speed. I don't know these days if those settings on the entry level will be enough or will be a really slow machine. I tend to believe that if you machine is on a budget, you are better doing a Chromebook than you are doing an entry level Windows. But I have always believed something like that. So
I'm not particularly bullish on the idea of a lower end tier to Surface products or even to the Pixel product line. I think that there are more than enough third party manufacturers that can, there's a huge OEM market for building on top of these platforms. Microsoft and Google and Apple should be building the flagships, with the best quality that we can see their software shine. And so I'm not particularly excited about these lower end tier market solutions. I think they potentially muddy the brand and don't really give us a good sense of what they're going after. I know that they're all under pressure to be able to create lower end models that are more affordable, but there are lots of other OEMs out there who can be doing that work. I want to see the best of what they can produce, and this just doesn't seem to cut that for me. Next up is an iPad related update for Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. What's that all about, Augusto?
finally, Microsoft Word and PowerPoint will support split view. Apple released iOS split view over a year ago, and Microsoft has took its sweet time to make sure that their applications work as they intended with the split view. Split view, it is really a fantastic thing on iOS, in my opinion, and really make you more productive. So it's well received, and it's good that finally you can do that split view and even put two instances of the same document.
And then, of course, that brings us along to some Google news about Google's ReadAlong app. In essence, Google has launched a new app designed to help teach kids to read. So the app is called ReadAlong, and it gives both visual and audible cues to the child as they read the stories aloud. And so what happens is the child's reading. If they make an error, they mispronounce or say something that doesn't match up with the words on the screen, it then is able to correct them and give them feedback visually on the screen of what is right and what's incorrect about their reading as they're going along. And this really is great for being able to teach literacy to children on their own. They're capable of sitting there and or standing and walking, whatever they're doing, but they're able to learn to read as they go along. I think this is actually really great for potentially the adult illiterate population. So there are quite a lot of people out there. I know because I actually volunteered for many years to adult literacy programs in Washington, D.C. And there's actually a very large illiterate population in the adult world. And so they are either low literate or they are completely illiterate, and they are among you. They are among us, and it's not something that's shameful. It's not a moral failing. It's a societal failing that we're not teaching people to be literate. And so I think this is actually a really great opportunity to be able to get this in the hands of anyone that you know that might be low literate and has the technology, has a smartphone to be able to install this and actually learn to read. There's nothing more powerful than the power of literacy, and so I'm really excited that they're doing this for both children, but also now potentially for adults as well. Last up is an iPad story. I'm going to turn that one over to you, Augusto.
Facebook also starts supporting split view and slide over the multitask support. So finally, you can multitask on Facebook. Why is important? Well, because it's interesting to see how finally some of these software monsters are coming to integrate the things like the split view. Now you can have multiple versions of Facebook on the same screen and even bring the slide over. So that's going to bring a change on how you can do more Facebook.
And so we're going to take a break in our headlines for a word from our sponsor this week, Zarvana, which you can find at zarvana.com, Zarvana.com.
As a young analyst at a leading strategy and management consulting firm, I experienced what ambitious professionals experience every week. I had a strong desire to get promoted as quickly as I could, and I wanted to take on exciting side projects. And I wanted to do all of that while spending less time at work so my life outside of work wasn't limited to exhaustion and recovery. My observations of my coworkers told me this wasn't possible, but I knew there had to be a way. I began to research and experiment, and in 2 to 3 months I had reduced the hours I was working by over 15%, while placing myself on the path to a faster than average promotion. My success led to the creation of Zarvana, a tool designed to give you the edge at work and in life. It combines a diagnostic, abbreviated courses, and a habit tracker into a single application to enable you to get the most out of your time in just minutes per week. You can start by taking the Time Finder diagnostic to find out how many of our 150 time-saving behaviors you're currently doing.
All right, before the break, we were discussing Facebook's new split view on iPadOS. And what's the next headline in our headlines rundown, Augusto?
The next headline is a nice review on the new Dell Ultra Sharp 49 inches, and they started doing the review on really what is a massive, massive screen. Uh, so they said they will come back in a future week to give us the result of that, but they come into this week to show us the setup and how big this is.
Following that, Asana on their blog recently announced a new feature that they're calling Status, and it's all designed around remote work. Of course, we're all dealing with lockdown and being in this, quote unquote quarantine world. And so if we're working from home and working remotely, the status function is a way to be able to give premium and business users within Asana the ability to see literally the status of projects. So clicking on the progress tab, users can now see the status of their current projects, and that is really, really useful. So it basically uses the highlights feature to show off. It uses the highlights feature to surface what the team has currently accomplished. It helps you to see which actions, milestones, and/or approvals need the team's attention, and you can, of course, see that from a week by week perspective. This I think is going to be a very useful story. This is going to be a very useful feature for those who are steeped in Asana and are capable of seeing that. They are hoping to actually add status to the portfolio level for business and enterprise users as well. So that should be coming out soon. And they're also going to be adding some charting features so you can see it graphically and visualize that data for a project. So they're really making inroads to make that. And again, they're talking about this from a remote collaboration perspective, but I think status is good just for any team working, whether or not they're working in the same space or apart. And so I'm really excited to see Asana adding this. We use Asana in one of the divisions of our company, and I'm always excited to see new features like this come to Asana.
Yeah, I think this will allow the during the remote working, but even when that ends, to see much faster how this started. So I think it's a fantastic implementation that Asana is doing in here.
Next up, we have a new report out called Work and Life Now More Than Ever Why Care Benefits Are a Must Have, produced by care.com, in which they talk about the importance of, for both employees and consumers, why family friendly benefits are more important and, in essence, less costly than other types of benefits that are given to employees. And so, this is really important for us to understand that the balance between caring for children and sometimes other family members. It can not just be elderly family members, but family members with different abilities. We need to understand that when we go to a working from home environment or remote work environment and we don't have the ability to send our kids off to school or to daycare or to what have you, or to friends' homes, that means that working from home is also taking care of our children at the same time. As we move into what will hopefully be a post-pandemic perspective soon enough, we need to then also take into account that American and global employers will need to start to think about the loss of productivity that will happen if we don't take care of those components. We need to make sure that families have respite from the other family members in their household. And so this care.com report is really interesting at fleshing out some of the interesting components of care benefits. They basically note here it's no longer a nice to have, they are a must have. And so they walk us through the cost of poor work life balance, the benefits of care benefits for families, and some of the iniquities that occur from employers not providing these items. So, if you want to be a progressive organization that is good at employee retention, you need to make sure that you're paying attention to care benefits post pandemic, because it's going to be really important for you to both retain, but also, as we should be talking about here, increasing and maintaining the level of productivity of your workforce. And so, if you are an employee within an organization, you need to be talking to your HR department and advocating for these kinds of care benefits, because if you don't, then you're going to have caregiving challenges. You're probably feeling them already now if you have been in lockdown like the rest of us, and it's going to be more and more difficult as we make our way forward, and we need to make sure that we get those kinds of conversations happening. This is not necessarily a conflict, but more just a recognition of the challenges that we're going to face. It's not just dealing with a spouse, it's potentially dealing with children or other family members that are being cared for in the primary household. Okay, next up.
Facebook officially released his 50% messenger rooms as an alternative to Zoom. One of the interesting things is people is getting more and more used to interact in camera. We don't know how long this stay at home will be. So Facebook responds to Zoom in giving inside of their Facebook where you can go and do this more social, maybe that work. I'm sure people will use it for business, but a lot more social interaction to come and have fun. I think it's a good thing, especially with everything that Zoom has been founded with their security, and they are working diligently in to solve those issues. But there has been issues, significant issues with that.
Yeah, and it's nice to actually have a differentiation between meeting for work in one place and meeting for social reasons in another place. And so, I recently hosted a Zoom birthday party, and it was very difficult to get some of our more mature family members to join Zoom, and they had to install an application on their mobile device or on their computer. They had to figure out how to use the settings and so on and so forth. And because they're already used to Facebook, there's just a little bit lower of a barrier to entry for them to be able to use messenger rooms, I think. Even though I'm not particularly a fan of Facebook for these kinds of things, I see the value in, if you're already there and you have family members who are already there, why go to some great lengths to change for those purposes? But again, I'm a big fan of context and understanding that, okay, Facebook is for socializing. That's where you can do that work, that kind of activity, and you have other tools and other digital environments for context. And if you don't want to bleed over those two, so that you're looking at your Zoom list of meetings and seeing personal things interlaced or interleaved in there, you can then take it out of there and put it into another platform, and messenger rooms, now that fits 50 people, that's giving you that capability.
Yeah, also it's important to notice that that 50 number seems to be getting into the standard. That's the same number that Google Meets offer, up to 50. So it seems to take a step in the right direction for these virtual meets for Google, for Facebook.
All right, next up, we have Box launches an all new experience. And the Box is a competitor to Dropbox for the most part. And what they've done now is they've provided just some new features. One, they're calling collections. So if you've used Vimeo or some other tools that use that term for collections, they're basically a form of folder, so that you could just organize your content in a way that you want. So in essence, you're allowed to create and name these spaces for projects and their related content. So in essence, they can hold other forms of containers that they call folders. So collections hold folders. They can also hold files and other bookmarked documents, in essence, shortcuts to other documents. And so it just gives you a really nice way to simplify the organization of your content inside of Box. They also give you a new feature called annotations. So in essence, you can now, just like with Dropbox Paper, you can now do some level of text commentary on what they say are 100 different file types. The other part is you can actually do freeform markup, which is kind of nice. So you can actually do freeform markup, which is an interesting new feature. So if you want to be able to add content into a timestamp from a video, put a line in a PDF, you can now do those kinds of things. I'm curious to see how that will work, and whether that will be useful to me in the Box world. They also have some enhanced Zoom integrations, of course, because they want to stay in line with the growing popularity of Zoom. And so now you're able to go ahead and integrate more tightly with Zooms, so you can create or join a meeting directly from within the Box interface. So that should be interesting to see once that all comes out. They're going to be doing that later in May and bringing that to general availability at that time. So very cool stuff there.
Yeah, the other feature that I thought it was really interesting was called file request, where it's trying to make for people who don't have a Box account or they're not part of the organization, being able to drop files into your Box. And that will be interesting as it's trying to bring the old FTP technology into the masses. So it will be really interesting to see how that feature works for Box.
Next up, we have Google Chrome is providing some new features. The next rollout will actually happen in Chrome 81, but the feature is now currently available, and the features are grouped tabs, what they're calling group tabs. But in essence, you are now able to group tabs together. You can turn this on by going to Chrome // flags, and in there you'll just type in group and you can see the tab groups. There are actually two sets of options you'll need to turn on in order to have the full set of features, but the first one allows you to be able to group tabs. And when you group those tabs, you're then able to name a tab. That means you can take a series of tabs that you have open in Chrome and add those to those particular groups, which then creates group a new tab in your Chrome interface, and then all of the open tabs that you had, the open websites you have, now fit inside of that space. You're also able to color that tab, which means that you can now color and create context for the various things that you're working on. So really, really love that feature. Now, the great part is that if you turn on the second feature, which is expanding and collapsing group tabs, you can now take your grouped tabs and collapse them and expand them with the other option within the Chrome flags. So very, very cool tool. I know that I will be making great use of this as being someone who has many, many tabs open at any given time, because they, in essence, act as desktops now for me. So akin to how Windows 10 has virtual desktops and Mac has the desktops or the spaces, I use those to create context for the various open applications that I'm using, with Chrome being in essence where most of my applications are living now. They're living in the browser. This is going to be really great for being able to have that set of open applications and what I'm working on with them and putting them into a group. And now I can change context to some other project or thing and do that. And some of them will be fixed, like the Anything But Idle podcast will now have its own group tab, but then some of them will be ephemeral, where I say, oh, I'm working on this particular project A, and now I can put all of those pieces that I'm working on for project A into that tab, and then I can come back to it later when I'm ready to pick up work off where I left it.
So the next is an article from Wired called Productivity is Not Working. It is a really interesting article from Lori Penny where it's talking about what is the definition that has been pushed into us about productivity and how this definition need to change now that we have need to find a way to cope with the crisis we're living. So, and how we need to look at this different. It is a really, really interesting look into how the definition has been into work into this relentless self-optimization versus where it's going to go now, what we are going to change, and how we are going to evolve our definition of productivity.
I definitely see the argument for some people who are anxious, then you are going to be feeling that in a concentrated perspective during this COVID-19 pandemic. And we need to step away from that a little bit and understand that we don't have to be as productive or self-optimizing as we tend to want to be when we are dealing with a crisis that creates great distress and economic hardship and familial stress and all these other things at the same time. So we need to be really mindful that our health is more important than our output, and that should be our concentration right now. And I think that's a really good message for folks. I don't particularly like this sense of coining productivity as a cult. I think that there's a misunderstanding about what it means to be a productivity enthusiast versus what it means for an entire society to be focused on being more productive. And many societal ills will be solved through greater productivity focus, and we're just not there yet. A very small portion of our society really focuses on being productive, and when we have a society that actually does, we'll all be better off. But maybe during a pandemic is not the time to be focused on that. With that, Apple just released their adjustments to their supplier responsibility report. What's Apple doing, Augusto?
On his recent supplier responsibility report, they went and modify some of the procedures that they ask their suppliers to do on lights of the COVID-19. Apple is trying to get themselves ahead of trying to be ahead of what is happening. So a few of the actions has been health screening, limiting and trying to create and enforce the social distancing, require the use of PPE both, and require the use of booth for the people to work, and implementing cleaning protocols or deeper cleaning protocols, as well as deploying masks and sanitizers for the employees on the floor. So Apple is trying really to keep themselves ahead on this responsibility report. They have been famous for years for try to do better. I'm not saying it's perfect, but at least do better than a lot of the industry does.
Our last article in the headlines is actually a data report that came out of Rescue Time. Rescue Time is the software that does data tracking, and so it does this passive data tracking of what you're doing on your digital devices. And the before March, there was some market change from what is happening now after March 11th. So they have like a before March 11th and then an after March 11th comparison of how people are interacting and engaging from this new remote work environment. And so some of the pieces of information that come out of this is that, of course, communications has increased, and of course, we see more and more people changing and adapting to the way in which we work since we're working from home.
There's one thing it really threw me off of this article, not in a good way, and it is the graphics they use, because they make the before March 11 this guy into this computer, and then after March 11 this guy, eating popcorn and working on the laptop. And I think that's a bad comparison image for the working from home and the working remotely. That said, the data is interesting, obviously communication, but what was interesting for me was seeing how software development, decreased 4%. The other thing that is interesting is they show obviously a significant increase of the hours that people is on their desktop devices, and the average time in China and the United States has come up 16%, China over 10%, Italy over 21%. What I would love to know is if it's on a particular desktop, is desktops in general, or really that means we're working 16% more, or we are now working 16% more on the desktop device versus other devices because we are not mobile anymore. So, as much as I enjoy a lot of the data on the article, I think it requires to look a little bit more data to really bring good conclusions out of it.
Yeah, I think with any particular looking at statistics, you have to remember what the base of the data is and then understand kind of from a gut perspective what you expect to see in the data. And so, for example, you're obviously going to see, or you should see, more people using desktops than mobile devices if they are in affluent countries that have access to desktop computers. So you're going to see that in those countries versus other countries where you're just going to see more mobile usage if they have lockdowns and they are working from home and they only have mobile devices to use. The other part to this is that the data they're pulling are from obviously people who are uh, working with rescue time installed on their computer, which for the most part is a paid tool and is a group of people who are predominantly focused on quantified self type stuff, right? They're paying attention to what they're doing. So this is a self-selecting crowd of people. So the data that you're seeing is of those of us, I'll say, kind of a royal we, who are highly interested in self-improvement and personal development and performance. So the data here is actually just the sliver of us who are paying attention, and that's not everyone. So I think this is a subset of people that we're seeing here, and so that's why some of the data seems like I'm actually rather shocked that we only increased communication by 49%. Maybe it's because most of the people using rescue time are probably software developers or knowledge workers who work from home to begin with. So there's only going to be a small increase because when the rest of your team now works from home, they are now meeting with you more than they normally would by video or audio or other types of communication. So we have to be kind of a little bit skeptical about how we're looking at the data, but I think still an interesting insight into some of the changes that are happening because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So with that, that brings us to the end of our headlines for this week, and that takes us to the science of productivity with Matt Plummer of Zarvana. Take it away, Matt.
Hi, this is Matt Plummer with the Science of Productivity segment, which brings you scientific insights you can trust into how to maximize the impact of your life and get an edge at work. In this week's segment, I want to unpack whether you should prioritize increasing time or money in your life. Harvard Business School professor Ashley Willens and her colleagues asked 1,000 college students which individual they most resemble: Tina, who is willing to sacrifice money to have more time, or Maggie, who would prefer to work more and make more money. Then they went back to them 2 years later and asked them how happy they were. The Tinas who valued time over money were significantly happier than those who prioritized money. Willens and her colleagues have also linked high satisfaction levels in countries that have lower GDPs like Colombia, Uzbekistan, Puerto Rico, to the fact that people in those countries value leisure, that is time, over work. Warren Buffett famously said that he could buy pretty much anything in the world, but he couldn't buy time. Fortunately, that's not quite true. You can invest your money to buy more time. For example, by hiring someone to do your household chores. And you can also forego additional money in order to preserve time. For example, by skipping that demanding job opening that pays more, but you won't love. To create a ripple effect that will generate many positive outcomes in your life, including overall well-being and job satisfaction, take the advice of this growing body of research and make decisions and investments that will maximize the time you have to do what you love.
So thanks to Matt Plummer of Zarvana for the Science of Productivity segment. Now let's get into our featured story of the week, Augusto. Our featured story of the week is all about Google, and they're providing us with some training for free through May 30th, where you'll get 30 days of free access to one of 3 different platforms, all free of cost. That includes the training and the certifications that come along with them. So Quick Labs, Pluralsight, and Coursera, all 3 have independent Google Cloud focused training, and they are providing that free of cost if you redeem the offer before May 30th. I think this is fantastic because most people don't actually know all that Google Cloud offers. If you already don't know this, I am the Google if you already don't know this, I am the Google Small Business Advisor for Productivity. And so I do a lot of training surrounding G Suite for small business owners. And G Suite actually lives within Google Cloud, within the Google Cloud platform. And so Google Cloud is so much bigger than most people think about.
And that was one of the things that were interesting. And we are sharing on our notes an image of everything that is included into Google Cloud. I was not aware that it includes so many things from that I was actually impressed how vast it is really. So I think if it's just go and look into that graphic is worth it in our notes and see how many things are that are part of this Google Cloud, because you will be surprised that you use more than the ones you think.
Exactly. I mean, just within the G Suite platform, there are a dozen or more different parts to it. But then we think about the general platform with machine learning and artificial intelligence and the data networking and database solutions, and just so many different pieces of Google Cloud that if you are interested in learning about those things, the person who develops it, you can see in the developer's cheat sheet, and you can actually check out his whole world at 4words.dev, the number 4words.dev. And again, these are all in the show notes, but you can see all of the various parts of Google Cloud and just understand that there is much more to it than meets the eye. And if you work in an enterprise environment and you're interested in learning more about Google Cloud, you have some training that you can go access there. It's free for the 30 days, but of course you can always access those trainings afterward, and the fees are rather nominal. So you can go ahead and get updated in terms of what Google Cloud is. And honestly, with the advent of an economic downturn and wanting to make yourself more appealing to your employers to keep on the payroll as opposed to getting rid of someone else, maybe highlighting the fact that you are bringing yourself up to speed and doing some and that you're doing some professional development, maybe can put a little notch in your cap against your other coworkers, unfortunately, which are now your competition for keeping your job. And so with that brings us to the end of our featured story of the week. And that brings us to the end of our featured story of the week, but also our episode. So feel free to follow us on social media at Anything But Idle, and also leave a rating or review in your favorite podcast app if you're capable of doing that. Let us know if there's a story we missed by using our contact page on anythingbutidle.com. You could also tweet. We have our DMs open on Twitter as well at Anything But Idle. Thanks for joining us here for Anything But Idle, the Productivity News Podcast. Until next time, here's to your productive life.